Hello. My fiancée mocked me by saying, "My ex asked me to marry him, and I accepted." I threw her out. Later, when she found out he'd been cheating on her, she came begging to come back, so I gave her a lesson she won't forget. My name is Logan, I am 34, and I work as a project estimator for a mid-sized construction company in Fort Worth, Texas. My work days usually start early and revolve around job sites and contractors calling about numbers. It is not glamorous, but it pays well and it keeps my life structured. I tend to handle problems quickly because construction teaches you that ignoring small issues usually turns them into expensive ones. My fiancée is Adriana, 31. We had been together a little over 3 years, engaged for 8 months, and living in my house for most of last year. We split groceries and utilities, but the house itself is mine. I bought it before we met. That detail ends up mattering later. I am posting because I know people will ask whether what happened came out of nowhere. It did not exactly come out of nowhere. Adriana always had a sharp personality, but she framed it as confidence and brutal honesty. Early on I accepted that explanation because she could also be funny, social, and very good at making people think they were the ones being overly sensitive. Over time I started noticing a pattern. Her version of honesty usually meant saying something disrespectful and then acting annoyed if anyone reacted normally. She especially liked doing it around other people. Not enough to start a full argument, just enough to make someone uncomfortable and then deny that anything happened. With me it was usually small things. She would comment that my job sounded boring whenever someone asked what I did. She joked more than once that estimating was basically guessing with a calculator. If we were out with friends, she had a habit of correcting small details in stories I told. Even when the correction added nothing, it felt like tiny power moves. That is the best way I can describe it. Never quite enough to justify a huge confrontation, but enough that I started noticing the pattern. The other issue was her ex, Paul. According to Adriana, he was immature, irresponsible, and a waste of her time. Yet his name came up more often than you would expect for someone who supposedly meant nothing. Usually it was framed as comparison. Paul used to plan better dates. Paul had better style. Paul understood her ambitions. If I reacted, she would roll her eyes and say mature adults can mention exes without being insecure. I tolerated that longer than I probably should have. Most of the time she would smooth things over just enough to keep things moving forward. Then about 2 Fridays ago we had a few friends over at my place for drinks, and Adriana said something in my kitchen that changed the direction of my life in about 5 seconds. That Friday started normally. A couple of friends came over after work. Nothing big, just drinks and takeout. Adriana left hosting when it meant she could control the atmosphere, and my place had enough room for 6 or 7 people without anyone feeling crowded. By around 10, everyone was relaxed and halfway through a second round of drinks. Conversations split into smaller groups around the living room and kitchen. I was standing at the kitchen counter talking with my friend Eric about a roofing bid I had been working on when Adriana walked in with her glass of wine. She had that look she sometimes got when she was about to say something she thought was clever. At first I did not think anything of it. She leaned against the counter and listened for a minute while Eric and I talked about a contractor who kept trying to undercut bids. Then she smiled in that tight way she had and said something that immediately changed the tone. She said that construction guys always took themselves way too seriously for people whose entire job was testing numbers. Eric laughed awkwardly. I shrugged it off and said estimating is basically educated guessing with math and experience. That usually ends that kind of comment. But Adriana was in one of her moods where she wanted attention. She swirled her wine and said that if we were talking about guessing, she had some interesting news too. That caught Eric's attention. He asked what she meant. Adriana looked directly at me when she said it. She said that her ex Paul had reached out earlier that week and asked her to marry him. For a second I thought she was setting up some kind of joke. The way she said it had that sarcastic tone she liked to use when she wanted people to lean in. Eric looked confused and asked if she meant before she met me. Adriana shook her head casually and took a sip of her wine. She said no, she meant this week. The kitchen went quiet in that weird way where everyone is suddenly aware that something just got uncomfortable. I asked her what she was talking about. She gave this little half shrug like it was the most normal thing in the world, and said that Paul had called her earlier that week, said he had made a mistake years ago, and asked if she would consider marrying him. Then she smiled again and delivered the part that actually mattered. She said that she told him yes. Not as a confession, not as a serious conversation. She said it like it was a punchline. For a few seconds nobody said anything. Not Eric, Not the couple sitting at the table behind us, not me. It was one of those moments where your brain is trying to catch up with what it just heard. I asked her to repeat what she said because I honestly thought I misunderstood. Adriana did not look nervous or embarrassed. If anything, she looked amused. She set her wine glass on the counter and said it again like she was explaining something obvious. Paul called earlier this week. He apologized for how things ended between them years ago. He told her he realized she was the one he should have married. Then he asked if she would marry him now. Eric glanced at me like he was waiting for the rest of the explanation. I asked Adriana what exactly she meant when she said she told him yes. She shrugged and leaned back against the counter. She said she accepted. Just like that. No build-up. No explanation. Just accepted. At that point I looked around the kitchen and realized everyone had gone quiet, trying not to listen. The mood in the house had completely shifted. So I handled the first problem. I stepped into the living room and told everyone the night was over. I said something came up and we needed the house to ourselves. Nobody argued. They could tell something was wrong. People grabbed their jackets, said quick goodbyes, and within a couple minutes the house was empty. Eric gave me a quick look on the way out that basically said good luck. Once the front door closed, the place went quiet. Adriana was still standing in the kitchen like nothing unusual had happened. She actually looked slightly annoyed that the evening had ended early. That was when I gave her the second piece of information. I told her to go upstairs and start packing her things. She frowned like she thought she heard me wrong. I repeated it calmly. I said if she had accepted a proposal from another man, even as a joke, she was not going to keep living in my house. So she could start packing tonight. For the first time that evening, the smug expression on her face disappeared. For a second Adriana just stared at me like she was trying to decide whether I was serious. Then she laughed. Not a nervous laugh. The kind of laugh someone gives when they think the other person is being dramatic. She said I was overreacting and that I needed to calm down. According to her, it was obviously a joke and I was embarrassing myself by taking it seriously. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue with her. I had already reached the point where the situation was clear enough. So I repeated the same sentence. I told her to pack her things. She crossed her arms and asked if I was really throwing away a 3-year relationship over a comment. I told her I was ending the relationship because my fiancée had casually told another man she would marry him and then announced it in my kitchen like it was entertainment. Those were her choices, not mine. Adriana tried to pivot immediately. She said I was twisting the situation. She said she never actually planned to marry Paul, and that anyone with common sense would understand that. She kept repeating that it was a joke and that I was proving her point about me being too serious. At that point there was nothing left to debate. I told her again that the house was mine and that she needed to pack her things tonight. She stood there for another moment waiting for me to back down. I did not. For the first time that evening the confidence drained out of her expression. She realized I was not negotiating and I was not going to argue back and forth for hours. She went upstairs without another word. About 40 minutes later, I heard the bedroom closet sliding open and drawers moving around. A while after that she came back downstairs with 2 bags and her purse. She still looked irritated, but the attitude was different now. The smug tone was gone. She said she was leaving and that I would regret acting like this once I calmed down. I told her I was already calm. She stood there for a second like she expected me to stop her at the door or soften the situation. I did not. So she grabbed her bags, walked out of the house, and drove away. Just like that, the engagement was over. I locked the door behind her, turned off the kitchen lights, and went to bed earlier than usual. What I did not realize at the time was that the situation with Paul was about to fall apart for her in a way she definitely did not expect. And when that happened, she came back. For about 2 weeks after Adriana left, I heard nothing from her. No calls. No texts. No late-night messages trying to restart the argument. Honestly, I expected at least something dramatic because that was usually how she handled conflict. But the silence was complete. During that time I handled the practical stuff. I boxed up the rest of her things that were still in the house and stacked them neatly in the garage. Mostly clothes, a few kitchen items she bought, and some decorations she insisted on when she moved in. Nothing complicated. No shared accounts. Bill lease issues. One of the advantages of the house being mine was that the logistics stayed simple. Emotionally, I moved on faster than I expected. Once the house was quiet again, it actually felt peaceful. My routine went back to normal. Early mornings, work sites, paperwork, gym after work. No sarcastic comments about my job. No constant comparisons to Paul. No little digs and further friends. A couple of mutual friends reached out asking what happened. I gave in the short version. Adriana told another man she would marry him and then thought it was funny to announce it in my kitchen. Most people understood pretty quickly why that ended things. Then on a Tuesday evening, right when I got home from work, my phone lit up with her name. Adriana. First message in over 2 weeks. The text was surprisingly simple. She asked if we could talk. Not argue. Not accuse me of overreacting. Just talk. I stared at the message for a minute before replying. I told her there was nothing left to discuss. About 30 seconds later another message came through. This one was longer. She said things had not worked out with Paul. That sentence alone told me everything I needed to know about what had happened over the last 2 weeks. But she kept going. She said she had made a mistake. She said she missed what we had and wanted to fix things. Then she asked if she could come by and talk in person. Apparently Paul had not turned out to be the better option she thought he was. I did not answer her right away. Instead I put my phone down on the kitchen counter and finished unpacking my work bag. One thing construction has taught me is that when someone suddenly changes their position, there is always a reason. Usually it is not the reason they say out loud. About 5 minutes later another message came through. Adriana said she knew things ended badly, but she hoped we could at least have a conversation. She said she owed me an explanation. That wording stood out to me. Not an apology first. An explanation. So I asked one direct question. I texted her and asked what happened with Paul. Her reply came almost immediately. She said things were not what they seemed, and that Paul had not been honest with her about his situation. That sentence alone told me most of the story already. But Adriana kept typing. She said after she left my house, she started talking to him seriously. According to her, he told her he had changed and that he was ready to settle down. He talked about moving in together and starting fresh. Then about a week into all of that, she found out he had been seeing someone else the entire time. Not casually either. Apparently the other woman thought she was already in a serious relationship with him. Adriana wrote that she discovered it when the woman messaged her directly asking why she was texting her boyfriend. So the big reunion with Paul lasted roughly a week before collapsing. At the end of the message Adriana wrote that she realized she had made a huge mistake. She said she should have appreciated what she had with me instead of entertaining someone from her past. Then she asked again if she could come by and talk. The thing is, by that point I already knew exactly why she wanted to see me. Paul had cheated on her, which meant the backup plan she thought she had was gone. And suddenly the guy she mocked in his own kitchen looked useful again. I've heard about Adriana's message for a while before responding. Not because I was considering getting back together. That decision had already been made the night she walked out of my house. But I was curious about something. I wanted to see if she actually understood what she had done, or if she was only reacting to Paul turning out to be a disaster. So instead of texting back a long explanation, I called her. She answered almost immediately, like she had been staring at her phone waiting for it to ring. Her voice sounded different from the last time we spoke. Less confident. More careful. She started talking right away. Adriana said she was glad I called, and that she wanted to explain everything properly. She repeated the same story she mentioned in her messages. Paul had reached out, apologized for how things ended years ago, and told her he had realized she was the one he should have married. According to her, hearing that got into her head. She said when he asked her to marry him, she responded without thinking about the consequences. She told him yes, because she wanted to see how serious he really was. Then she admitted that after leaving my house, she actually tried to see where things with him would go. For about a week, she thought she had made the right decision. Then the other woman contacted her. Adriana explained that Paul had been in a relationship the entire time, and neither of them knew about the other. Once they came out, the whole situation collapsed almost immediately. After she finished telling the story, her tone softened. She said she realized she had thrown away something real for someone who had already proven he could not be trusted. She said she missed the stability we had, and that she wanted to fix what she broke. I let her finish without interrupting. Then I gave her the lesson she will not forget. I told her the situation was actually very simple. She believed Paul was a better option than the man she was engaged to, so she disrespected our relationship in front of other people, because she thought she had already upgraded. Now that Paul cheated on her, suddenly, I was valuable again. She tried to argue that it was not like that. I stopped her and said one last thing. When you leave someone because you think you found something better, you do not get to come back when the better option fails. There was a long pause on the phone after I said that. For the first time since the call started, Adriana did not immediately argue back. I could hear her breathing on the other end while she tried to figure out what to say next. Eventually she said I was being unfair. She said the situation with Paul had confused her and that she had made a mistake, but that did not mean our entire relationship should be erased. She reminded me that we had 3 years together. Trips, holidays, meeting each other's families. According to her, that history should count for something. I told her it did. That history was exactly why I ended things the moment she said yes to Paul. Because someone who actually respects a 3-year relationship does not gamble it for attention from an ex. She tried a different angle. Adriana said she never actually planned to marry him. She said the proposal caught her off guard, and she responded without thinking. Then she said announcing it at my house had been a stupid attempt at humor. According to her, she expected me to laugh it off. I told her that explanation actually made things worse. Because if she truly believed telling her fiancé that she accepted another man's proposal was a joke, that meant she did not understand basic respect in the first place. Another quiet pause followed. Then her voice shifted slightly. She asked if there was any chance we could start over slowly. Not jump straight back into the engagement. Just talk, spend time together, and rebuild things. The way she asked it made something very clear. She still believed there was a path back. So I made sure the situation was absolutely clear before ending the call. I told her the reason this situation hurt her so much was because she assumed I would still be waiting once Paul failed. She thought I would stay in the same place while she tested another option. But relationships do not work like that. When someone shows you that you are their backup plan, the correct response is to remove yourself from the list entirely. After I said that, I ended the call. Then I opened my phone settings, blocked her number, and removed her from every place she could contact me. If the lesson was going to stick, the door needed to stay closed. After I blocked Adriana's number, things went quiet again. There was the last direct conversation we ever had. For the next few weeks my life went back to normal in a way that honestly felt better than before. My mornings started early like usual. Coffee, work truck, job sites around Fort Worth. Then evenings at home without tension or sarcasm waiting for me at the door. A couple of mutual friends eventually asked what happened between us. Apparently Adriana had been telling people that we had a misunderstanding and that I was refusing to talk to her. I did not argue with anyone about it. When someone asked me directly, I explained the situation once. My fiancé accepted another man's proposal and announced it in my kitchen. I ended the engagement. Most people did not have many follow-up questions after hearing that. About a month later, I heard the rest of the story through a friend who still had contact with her. Apparently things with Paul had ended even worse than I originally thought. Once the other woman discovered Adriana, she contacted both of them. From what I was told, that turned into a mess of accusations, screenshots, and arguments between all 3 of them. Paul apparently tried to juggle explanations until both women compared messages and realized he had been lying to each of them in different ways. In the end, neither of them stayed with him. So Adriana did not just lose me. She also lost the guy she thought she was upgrading to. Hearing that did not make me feel happy or vindicated. Mostly it just confirmed what I already suspected. When someone behaves the way Paul did, the outcome is predictable. But the part that stuck with me was something else my friend mentioned. He said Adriana had told him she thought I would calm down after a few weeks and eventually call her. Apparently, she believed the relationship was too long and too stable for me to actually walk away permanently. That assumption turned out to be the biggest mistake she made in the entire situation. It has been several months since all of this happened. Life moved forward in a pretty normal way once the noise was gone. The house stayed quiet, my routine stayed steady, and I had more mental space than I realized I had been missing. When a relationship ends because of one clear decision, there is not much left to process afterward. You just adjust and keep going. Every once in a while someone will ask if I regret how quickly I ended the engagement. My answer is always the same. No. The reason is simple. What Adriana did was not just a bad joke or a moment of poor judgment. It was a decision. She made that decision twice. First when she told Paul yes. Then again when she announced it in my kitchen like it was something funny. That kind of disrespect does not appear randomly. It shows how someone actually views the relationship. If I had argued for weeks, begged her to explain herself, or tried to compete with Paul for her attention, the situation would have looked completely different. Instead, I made one decision and stuck with it. The result was very clear. She left thinking she had a better option. When that option collapsed, she expected the original one to still be available. It was not. There was the lesson she learned. You do not test whether the grass is greener somewhere else, while still expecting the first lawn to remain untouched. Once you walk away from a solid relationship because you believe you found something better, the risk becomes yours to carry. In my case, the engagement ended the moment she said yes to someone else. Everything that happened after that was just the natural consequence of her own choices. And honestly, that level of clarity made moving on a lot easier than most breakups people go through. Bye-bye.